So I thought the best thing to do, and they have done a similar thing in England. The acting general secretary has done something nationally, but is to do specifically this for Wales, because obviously we have different pay and different conditions of service in Wales, and it is different in Wales, and there are important things that you need to know. Right. First of all, let's start with pay. What I'll do is I'll just run through these. I'll give a talk on this, and then I'm more than happy to take any comments and questions. But there's obviously quite a lot of you, and if we're in a situation whereby there are too many comments and questions coming in, what we'll try and do maybe is capture those. If you don't get your question answered, then please email us and we will endeavour to respond to you and answer that question if we don't get a chance to do so in this meeting. Okay, let's bring you up to speed with what's going on. I'm going to assume that you know nothing. So my apologies to people who are pretty well in tune with what is going on with regards to the change in pay and conditions that's happening in September, but I am going to assume you know nothing. Now, what we have in Wales is we have a review body, the IWPRB, that reports to the Education Minister with recommendations for changes in terms of pay and non-pay conditions of service. Now, this year, the review body has recommended a pay uplift for teachers in Wales of 4.8%. And that would be from September, there would be a pay uplift of 4.8%. Or what usually happens, I have to say, in Wales, there'll be a delay of a few months and then everyone will end up with back pay until September. But that's neither here nor there. There would be a pay uplift. It would be from September. Now, the Welsh government, for the first time ever since it has taken control of pay and conditions for teachers in Wales, has not accepted the recommendation of the IWPRB for the pay uplift. Instead of 4.8%, the Welsh government have said 4%. Now, the reason for that, as I'm sure you're aware, is because 4% is the pay uplift that has been offered to teachers in England. Now, it's a pretty dangerous precedent. And you might get someone from the Welsh government saying, "Oh, we've disagreed with the review body before," but they've only disagreed with the review body before when they've had to, because the English uplift was higher than Wales, and we have a no detriment clause in Wales, which means that they can't pay us any less in Wales than England. So they've been forced to give teachers more if the review body's recommendation is less than England. So to a certain extent, we are in a having our cake and eating it position in Wales with the review body. If they say more, then we should get more. If they say less, we should still get more because we should get what England say. Now, this year, though, is the first time they've said no, because it is more than England, and they've decided they can't afford it. Now, we've got Wales conferences taking place this weekend, and we're doing a survey there of our activists that are coming to Wales conference. And we're going to obviously need to touch base with the membership as a whole, hence this meeting being the start of that, is to what your attitude is towards that. Whether you think that's reasonable at this time, whether you think that's unreasonable, whether you think that is a step too far, whether you think that is a dangerous precedent, and it brings into question what's the point of having a review body in the first place, an independent review body, if the Welsh government don't accept that pay uplift. Now, I'll park that one there because it'll be with the acting general secretary and the national officers to decide how they're going to pursue that, and the national executive how they pursue that. But that's something I think you need to be discussing with your colleagues as to whether we should respond to that, possibly with a national ballot, because of the fact that they have not honoured what the IWPRB have said. Now, that brings its own problems, colleagues, in terms of national ballots because of the anti-union laws and the hoops that we have to jump through. However, that is something for consideration, and people do need to have to think about that and discuss that. Now let's go back to the Welsh Government's position. Now, when I met with the Minister on this, and we had individual meetings, each of the education unions had individual meetings with the Minister, she was at great pains to say, right, okay, we can't afford the pay uplift. We're going to pay the same as England. However, what we are going to do is two things. First of all, they're going to now proactively take forward something which was from the review body last year with regards to Elenkos, which I'll come back to. And the other thing was that they're going to pick up something from the strategic review of the review body. Now, let me explain. Last year, well, this is a couple of years ago now, the previous education minister said, look, we need the review body. Instead of looking at this in bits and pieces, look at the profession as a whole and what do we need to improve things for teachers in Wales? And then the Welsh Government got the shock of its life because the review body came up with loads of things. Some of them were pretty good as well, and some of them we really liked. And we thought, this is brilliant. Not only did the review body do that, they even put down a calendar for implementation as to when these things should come into play. And so the Welsh Government, which kind of like opened Pandora's box here and let this one out, then was trying to mix my metaphors, trying desperately to put the genie back in the bottle after the review body had come out with all these great things that we could have in terms of non-pay conditions for teachers in Wales. So the Welsh Government, as predictably, picked up a couple of bits and pieces from the review body that weren't going to cost them any money and were no great shakes in terms of changing conditions of service for the classroom teacher, and left the really good stuff there and tried to ignore it and tried to forget about it. Now, when I met with the minister, she was at pains to say because that what they would do in return for the fact that they were not paying what the review body had said, that they were going to be 0.8 short, that they were going to accept point one of the strategic review. Now, point one of the strategic review was the removal of the threshold, which eventually is going to move towards the removal of the upper pay scale. So in other words, there's going to be the creation of the single pay scale. Now, that is something that we've been asking for a while. Because what we are finding is that the threshold application is discriminatory, that it can be abused and used as a bullying tool in some of the worst cases. And we're finding that a lot of our members it's also extremely workload intensive as well. To be able to cross that threshold. And then there are some schools, this should not be happening, but it is happening, who are making teachers jump through hoops to access the upper pay scale levels. So all in all, it was something that started 25 years ago as a good thing, because the whole idea behind the upper pay scale, by the way, was for the classroom teacher to access high pay rather than having to go through the management route so that they could stay with the kids. Well, that original philosophy has been entirely forgotten. And now it's, as I say, it's been used as a tool, an accountability tool, which is workload intensive and punishes our members. So we've been wanting its removal for a while, and the Welsh Government were basically, I think, offering it as an olive branch and saying, you can have that. You can have the removal of the threshold. Now, the meeting with the minister, I said, but when? Because I'm so used to the Welsh Government offering treats and then them taking years to implement them. They put them into committees after committees after committees, and you're just talking about it all the time, and you're never getting anywhere. And then they didn't say anything to me at the meeting, but a couple of hours later, they shared with me the Blue Book. The Blue Book is basically the main conditions of service document for teachers. The Blue Book, how it would look, how it would be changed from September. Now, I'm just going to share this with you, colleagues, if I can. Hopefully this is successful. Uh, is that okay? Thumbs up. Are we? Can you see that? Is everyone can see that? That should be on your screens now. Yeah, great. Thank you. Look at this. This is a tracked change uh, document. This is the blue book as it is at the moment, changed to what it's going to look like from September. And you'll notice then paragraph 15 moving from the main scale to the upper pay scale, and they've deleted application to be paid on the upper pay scale. So they've removed the idea of an application to the upper pay scale. So you will just move from the main scale to the upper scale, just a smooth transition. And you can see there that they've deleted all of those things, the hoops that you have to jump through to be able to access that. Now, um, um, however, we're still going to be in a situation where the main pay scale is going to be annual, and the upper pay scale, which is going to still exist for this next year, is going to be biennial. They've not changed that yet, and the reason they've not changed that yet, I think, is understandable, because that's going to change. That's going to require consultation, and that's going to require some heavy-duty number crunching to look at the increments and how they move and how they change. And so what I'm saying is that they can't do it quickly. What they can do quickly is remove the threshold, and that's what they've done. So we are going to be left with rather a peculiar system of a main pay scale and an upper pay scale, which are different in terms of the way they are awarded, but they're the same in terms of they are going to be automatic. So this is really good news. It's good news for teachers in Wales. It has removed something which has been a problem with us for quite a long time. And this next year, to, in a sense, put the icing on the cake, but this is going to be the difficult negotiating with the Welsh Government. What we will be attempting to do is to make this a 6-point scale, remove the upper pay scale, just basically have a 6-point move from the bottom of the scale to the top of the scale. So it's going to be a much quicker transition for our members to higher pay scales. Okay. Now, one question I've been asked on this, which I think is a really good question. I got asked it. I was in a school a couple of days ago. I was sitting in the staff room at a lunch hour, and I was very excitedly telling people all of this. And this teacher is sitting 2 spaces down from me. He was a young teacher. Suddenly looked up and said, "Oh, I'm having to cross the threshold. I'm having to do this now." She was doing it this time. She was doing that work to cross the threshold. Do I still have to do it? Now, I've thought long and hard about that, because the problem is that we are operating under the present Blue Book, and the present Blue Book says you have to do the threshold application. We're not going to be operating under the new Blue Book until September, and from September it says you don't have to do the threshold application. However, my initial thoughts on that were then to advise our members that yes, even though it's the last year, you're still going to have to do that threshold application. But if you read this, and I've read this more carefully since, I don't think that's the case, because it says qualified teachers will move from the main pay scale to the upper pay scale following completion of a year of employment completed on M5 during the previous school year. So this speaks of the previous year. So that means, therefore, as our members will be on this from September, we can argue, what we must be arguing with employers, if there are any problems here, is that they didn't have to do the application. They automatically go as long as they've completed that year of employment. They've completed M5, they automatically go up. So it speaks to the previous year. Even though it's the Blue Book for next year onward, it speaks to the previous year. So I think the advice we're going to be needing to tell our members is that you can bin that threshold application, because you will be automatically moving up from September. Now, a little caveat to that before I put my neck right out on the block is that this is going through a consultation process. Now, that to a certain extent is a rubber stamp. There's not going to be anyone that's going to oppose this. The local authorities might get twitchy about it, but I don't think anyone's going to oppose this. This is going to go through. But until basically that consultation process is over, which is going to be the middle of July. We can't say 100% that this is down there, but when it does happen, that consultation process is over, that is there, then that's going to be the situation for our members. So those are the conversations we need to be having. So if you're finding in your schools this is happening in your schools, then it might be an idea to talk to the school leaders to say, this is definitely coming in. Our members do not need to be jumping through these hoops anymore. You do not need to be putting those M5 teachers through, the pain and stress and workload with regards to the threshold application, because it's going to be automatic from September. Okay, moving on to the Elenco. Sorry, this says a lecture, but I'll just do the Elenco bit and then we'll finish. I don't need to share this anymore. Except it's so bright in here I can't even see my cursor. So, there we go. Stop share. Okay, moving on to the Elenco part. One of the things that's also come in, and it was something that we were working on for a couple of years with the Welsh Government and was achieved, was that because of the changes because of the ALN code, because of the accountability and the responsibility with regards to ALN, moving from the local authorities down to a school level, to massively increase the responsibility of Alencos in schools. And that was accepted by the review body and has been accepted by the Welsh Government, and the Welsh Government are now acting upon that. So the other thing that's coming in from September is that Alencos should be put onto senior leadership pay, senior leadership conditions. There can be no detriment. So if an Elenco suddenly finds that actually that means they're going to be paid less, that can't happen. They'll either be paid the same or more. There is a problem for those particular members, though, because moving on to senior leadership is no bed of roses, because there might be the higher pay scale and access to higher pay, but of course they don't have the protections of 1265 and working time limits. However, watch this space. One of the things that is the review body have said this year is that senior leaders should have working time limits. And we're supporting that because we also want to ensure that the classroom teacher has working time limits as well, because the 1265 is a bit of a red herring, but I won't go down that rabbit hole at the moment because I don't think we don't have time. But what I'm saying is that it might be a situation whereby that's not going to be a problem for those Elencos, because it might be for all senior leaders that they do get a working time limit following what's been happening this year. But that is also happening. So that's also due to happen. Now, that to a certain extent is more complex, because there are lots of issues and caveats and situations with regards to schools and the positions of Elencos in different schools and how it works. That's going to be more complex. And there is I wouldn't 100% say that's a done deal as we're going through the consultation. Because they've got to deal with lots and lots of different complications of how this works in different schools. However, I do think the threshold one is a done deal, and that will definitely be a rubber stamp process in terms of the consultation. Right then, so that's where we are, colleagues. We're in a situation whereby teachers in Wales will not be paid less than teachers in England in terms of the pay uplift. In fact, they're paid slightly more because we had a higher uplift a few years back, and that's never been remedied. So teachers in Wales are actually paid slightly more than teachers in England. And that's not going to change. But that gap's not going to get any bigger because the Welsh Government have said no to the 0.8. That's a dangerous precedent because they've never done it before, and it does bring into question the whole process of having a review body. However, the olive branch, the sweetener, if you like, is they're getting rid of the threshold, and they're going to put Elencos onto the senior leadership teams. So that's where we're going to be from September. Okay, I am going to shut up now. I'm more than happy to take any comments or questions. So over to you. Anyone want to ask a question, or is there anything in the chat I should be looking at which asks questions?
Yeah, Neil.
Yeah.
In the chat, there's a couple of good questions there about, is this the first time that this has happened in Wales for Wales to be lower than the recommendation. And there's another good question about what's happened with M6 and does that exist anymore? I was about to answer it, and I think Mogsy's done a good answer in there.
Yeah. Yeah, the answer is yeah, they are good questions. First of all, that first one, yes, it is the first time. That's why I've said it's a dangerous precedent. It is a dangerous precedent. Now, we like review body. Well, we don't particularly like the English review body, but we do like the Welsh review body. The Welsh review body has made some significant changes, and certainly the strategic review is an excellent document. And the last thing we need is to undermine the review body, because the NEU don't like review bodies. The NEU want to get rid of the review body and have collective bargaining. I seriously do not believe we would be where we are today in Wales, having better conditions for teachers in Wales, if we'd have had collective bargaining. We need a review body which takes an intelligent look, looking at all the submissions from all of the stakeholders, and comes out with good ideas for how to improve the working conditions of teachers. We need that body. So this undermines the review body, and that's a bad thing. M6, yeah, it will still exist until next year. What we're going to do, all that's happening here is the thresholds going, and then people will just automatically move through. So it will still exist, but probably, I say probably, it depends on how the consultations go, but it probably won't exist the year after next, because I would imagine we'll be looking at a new pay scale. And as I said, what we want to do is to create a 6-point pay scale. So I tell you what, Lou, could you do me a favour? Because I'm struggling to actually see
Yeah,
because it's so light in where I see. Could you read out ones that you think are good questions for me to answer?
yeah. That's what I was going to do, if that's all right, Neil. And I'm also scrolling through to see if there's any digital hands up as well.
Thank you.
There's a couple of good questions here about how do the changes to ALN codes impact SEN teachers, and how about additional behavioural needs coordinators, as we have both.
Right, it only impacts Elenkos. It only impacts Elenkos. There's the pay uplift with regards to the 4%. Also is going to go on to TLRs, and is also going to go on to the SEN allowance or the ALN allowance. So the only way it will impact separately there is there'll be the 4% pay uplift. But other than that, no, it only affects official Elenkos in schools that are automatically put onto the leadership spine.
How about,
I saw one. Quickly jumping on. I saw one about SEN schools, special
yeah,
schools. If the
that's
special
it.
school is operating teachers' pay and conditions, which it should be, if they're in teachers' pay and conditions, then exactly the same applies. Except, of course, you work in a special school, you should be getting the SEN allowance on top.
I've just answered about the pay increase being fully funded by Welsh Government. I don't think there's anything else I've missed here. If they go against the review body recommendation of the first time, wouldn't it be a possibility that they try this again if we accept it?
Uh, Good question. And that is something for you to decide.
Yeah,
The I have to say, what they've done in the past is pretty sneaky, but they've done it all the time. Is they fully accept the recommendations. This is, I'm talking about the non-pay recommendations then, and then ignore them. They've accepted something and then they just carry on and do nothing about it. But that's never happened with pay. It's never happened with pay. With the pay recommendation, they've always either accepted it or had to increase it because of the no detriment clause. And therefore, they've done it now. Um, Good question in the sense of, if we do not now robustly stand up to that and challenge that, then will they do it again? More than likely. But I think it's got to do, it's purely got to do with the funding that we get through from England using the Barnett formula. If there's only a 4% uplift in England, there's only going to be the 4% in Wales, or not even that, actually, depending on how that works. And so they're obviously worried about money. There's one thing I didn't mention, my apologies, and I should have mentioned it. There's the guarantee that the 4% will be fully funded. They've guaranteed that the 4% will be fully funded, because one of the beefs that we obviously have is that schools and local authorities, cannot afford to put more money into pay in these difficult times. So they have guaranteed they'll be fully funded. Now there are question marks over that I won't bore you with in terms of playing silly games in terms of those figures, but we'll deal with that with the Welsh Government. As far as we are concerned, we've made the commitment that it'll be fully funded, and we will hold them to that commitment. But the decision as to whether my predecessor Rex always used to say, "Up with this, we will not put," is up to the members, and we will be testing the water with the members and proceeding with that certainly over the next couple of weeks. And then it's a difficult decision for the national executive and national officers to decide as to whether we do move forward towards a ballot.
Does an SLENCO have to move on to SLT? Is it a choice? And then so ALNCO will move to leadership scale, not TLR. Will this be the same or less, the deputies?
Okay, for movement from TLR to the senior leadership scale, it cannot be less. There is no detriment in place, so you cannot be paid less. But they'll just move you onto the scale which is above what you would be presently on with regards to the TLR. Now, the question about do you have to is a really good one, and is a difficult one. And it's something that we are going to be exploring in the consultations moving forward as to how this is going to look in the Blue Book. But I think the difficult answer is going, and this is just Butler's thoughts here. This isn't actually what's going to happen, because obviously we're going to talk about this, see if there's any ways around this. I think the answer is going to be yes. If at the end of the day, the Elenco is written into being part of the senior leadership, and that's what exists in the Blue Book, those are the non-pay conditions that are accepted by maintained schools in Wales. They have to operate to the letter. So I think the answer would be yes. And so that's a difficult one, which we're going to have to look at.
Yeah, there's a couple of more points here about if we do push for the 4.8, will the school have to fund the 0.8%?
Highly likely.
Yeah.
Highly likely. I think that's a really good question as well, actually, because that I think is what would happen. If let's just say we were successful with a ballot, and we did through industrial action force the Welsh Government to recant, as it were. I think that is exactly what they would do. They would say, okay, then 4.8%, but there's no more money. So and then of course we'd probably continue the action because we'd say no, we wanted 4.8% fully funded. But my guess is that's exactly what they would do.
That might means it may not be very much for some ALNCOs, £500 for more work.
It shouldn't be more work. That's an interesting question. It should not be more work. The move is to recognise the work that is presently being done. What must not and should not happen is that when an Elenco moves onto SLT, they are a special part of SLT. They still remain as Elencos. They're not Elencos plus SLT, so that the school leader can then bolt on a load of other responsibilities, which would normally be the responsibilities of SLT. They remain Elencos. The whole point of this, by the way, is not to give more work to Elencos. Good grief, they've got enough. The whole point of this is to recognise the work that Elencos are presently doing and their accountability and responsibility levels, which have increased because of the ALN changes.
I see.
It's a really interesting one. Sorry, Luke. It's a type of thing I can see happening, though. With bad managers, bad school leaders thinking, oh, I've got another member of the SLT. Here's a couple of extra duties. That must not happen, and we need to guard against that.
If we push for fully paid, can they revoke the pay scale deal?
Oh, now, wow.
Yeah.
That uh, I would I would say no. They've already written the changes into the blue book. So I would say no. They might try it. Uh, that would be interesting. But my guess is no. But that could be famous last words.
Hey, this is a good one, Neil. How will they set the leadership scale for the ALNCO as the head teacher is set by the group school and the deputy is below that with the top and bottom at least 2 points apart?
That is a good question. It would not be the same as the head teacher. It would be, my guess, it would be the equivalent of a deputy assistant head in terms of what the scale would be. I would have to. That's a good question, which I'd probably like to come back to you later. I'd have to look at the amended blue book and how they have written that in. So if Orion is on the call, if you log that one for me, I'll find myself an answer to that, and I'll
I
distribute
don't,
that to colleagues.
I don't know if I can be any help there, Neil.
Yeah, go on, Luke.
If I think of a certain guinea pig deputy head teacher who was made ALNCO, I know very well. Um, and it was based on there was an inclusion based on the grouping of the school and the amount of key stage 4 pupils.
Yeah,
So I don't know if that's of any help to the answer to that question, because
I
that
think
did
that's
end up.
I think that's logical. So, but let me check. Okay, I'd like
Yeah,
to check that.
yeah, there you go. Brilliant. Anyone got any digital hands up that perhaps wants to speak audio or audio wise, or is everyone just happy to continue with the chat and go in there? But if anyone does want a hands up scenario and wants to come in,
Well, are we done?
yeah.
Okay, I think are we there then, Luke? Do you think?
Uh,
Can we give people back their evening if there's no more questions?
so will we be faced with deputies turning into a ALNCO if schools can't afford?
Yeah, yeah. No, no. I think the Alenko role cannot or should not be a bolt-on to a deputy's role. It goes back to my previous answer, really. What may
Mm.
happen is having an ALNCO that does clusters of schools. But basically, depending on if it's small schools we're talking about, I can see that happening in terms of how the ALNCO works. But what you cannot have is a situation whereby a deputy doing a job of work suddenly finds himself having an ALNCO responsibility suddenly bolted on. That goes back to the point I made before. An ALNCO is a separate role that's going to exist within the Blue Book.
There's a question here about what about supply teachers? I'm assuming that Kareen means just supply teachers in terms of the overall news on pay and conditions.
Yeah, well, the supply teachers, obviously, it depends on whether they're doing the supply through an agencies and what the conditions are with the agencies or whether they're in a pool. But basically, the pay uplift would apply to supply teachers as it applies to any teacher, so long as their routed to supply recognises and respects teachers' pay and conditions. I thought I saw Helen's hand up at one point. It disappeared again.
It was to point out that question about the supply teachers. That's
Oh, right.
because I thought Luke had skipped it. Sorry, but you've
Thanks,
answered.
Helen. Thank you, Helen. I mean, the thing about supply teachers, by the way, as you all know, the terrible failure of the Welsh government with regards to the national supply pool. They marched us up to the top of the hill over that, and then they marched us all back down again. Something that was such a promising initiative to actually deal with the exploitation of the agencies and just abandoned. Lack of will, lack of competence. I don't know what you'd call it really, but it's left supply teachers hanging again and being exploited. We are going to be taking that up with the Welsh government to increase the requirements of agencies through the procurement framework. But that's small compensation. What we need is a national supply pool for Wales.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of answers the question there put by Beth about supply teachers never get the uplift. I mean, and as many secretaries and you will back me up on this, the amount of times we've taken to local authorities about trying to encourage the end of LMS and the end of the mess that the supply teachers put us in. So yeah,
Angela?
the supply.
Yeah, Neil, can I just say that it'll be if supply teachers are registered with a framework agency, part of the actual procurement process is they will get the uplift, but the difficulty is if it doesn't get agreed, like quite often it doesn't get agreed until like November, December or whatever, then they won't get the back pay. Because agencies have got no way of recouping it retrospectively, have they? So
that's an excellent point, actually, and it's just another, isn't it? Another kick in the teeth for supply teachers, isn't it? The only thing I will say, and again, please don't hold me to it, is that I'm looking at changes to the Blue Book now in June. Normally with the Welsh Government, I'd be waiting till September, October to be looking at changes in the Blue Book. So to be fair to them, this is much, much earlier than usual. And given that the consultation ends in the middle of July, and as long as we get no problems with that consultation, then this should be on the table for the beginning of September.
it's great news. Good.
Thank you. Okay. If there's no other contributions, Luke, are you happy to should we draw it to a close?
Yeah, and just thank you, Neil, for everything you've done and continue to do for us in Wales.